Across the country, vibrant theater companies, regional theaters, stage new works and old favorites and bring theater to life for their communities. Hello, I'm Ted Chapin, Chairman of the American Theater Wing, and with us today are the artistic directors of 4 regional theaters. Christopher Ashley from La Jolla Playhouse, Gordon Edelstein from the Long Wharf Theater, Sara Garonzik of the Philadelphia Theater Company, and Eric Rosen from Kansas City Repertory Theater. Welcome, one and all.
Thank you, Ted.
I thought I'd start by saying that every one of the companies that you run was started with an artistic vision of somebody else's. So with that in mind, I thought I'd ask Sara, when was the moment, we can all answer it, but you first,
Sure.
Ladies first. When was the moment that you thought, I want that job?
Well, I never had aspirations to have that job. I just wanted to be a part of that company if they would just let me direct. And fortunately or unfortunately, the founding artistic director decided he wanted to move on to something else, teaching. I think he had a relationship with Joe Papp at the time and just wanted to move on. And so I sort of grafted myself onto his inheritor, his the person he sort of left the company to, and I just said, I will do anything to direct here, anything, and I did. I did press, I cleaned the bathrooms, and I began directing. And then eventually the board came to me and asked me to become its artistic director. So, and then I grew into the job over a long period of time, and then became the producing artistic director, which is something a little different, where I stopped directing for the stage and began taking a kind of a more of an artistic oversight, business producerly kind of position with the company.
But that was also the moment when there was a little downturn in the company, right?
And
then you
know
came
about
in,
that.
came in and
Ted,
saved
how did
the
you
day.
know about that?
No, I
Yes,
did my
yes,
homework.
a long
He
time
knows
ago in
everything.
a galaxy far away, there was financial difficulties, not of my own devising, and so we reorganized. And I ascended, if you want to call that, or descended to the role of producing artistic director, where the model, the business model was sort of me at the top with a kind of a pyramid support staff. And it has been like that for quite some time. And we just brought in a managing director, I guess about 2 years ago.
That's
So
great.
I can think lofty thoughts.
How long have you been there?
A long time, Gordon.
Oh, okay.
The 80s, the early 80s.
Wow. It's fantastic.
Sarah actually
Yeah.
hired me for one of my very first jobs in a regional theater.
Well, that's
Oh
why
my
I'm saying,
God,
because
that's
same
funny.
with me.
Well, we co-produced Glengarry Glen Ross with Cap Rep.
Yeah, and I did it,
And
yeah.
that's how I met Gordon. We did a
And Gordon,
fabulous job.
you were at Long Wharf in a previous incarnation, and then
And I
went
was
away.
the associate artistic director in the 90s.
Wow.
And then I went to become artistic director of ACT Theater in Seattle, and then came back to Long Wharf as artistic director.
So you were a known commodity to the Long Wharf group.
I was, for better or for worse. And they still hired me, Hard to believe.
And Chris, you sort of took over a theater known certainly to the Broadway community in La Jolla. What was that?
Well, I was a freelance director for about 20 years, and for some reason La Jolla Playhouse has always been the one I wanted to run if I was going to run a theater. I applied for it the first time Des McAnuff left when I was about 28, and now I think, well, of course they didn't hire me. I knew absolutely nothing about anything. But since then I've always thought, well, that's the theater. It's in a place I love. It's got a really adventurous audience trained by years of really interesting theater, great spaces, and a great staff. So when it came available, I jumped.
And Eric, did you have experiences at the theater before, or as a director?
I directed twice at Kansas City Rep before I even took the first interview. So I knew what I was getting into, what the town was like, a little bit. You know, I'd spent about 10 weeks there of my life and hadn't really at that time imagined taking it on. It had been historically run by, how shall I say, politely, much more senior figures than myself. And, I'm only the 4th artistic director in the company's 45-year history, and had come from Chicago, where I started theater and ran that theater for 13 years. So I was on the transition edge of leaving a smaller theater, looking for a larger place to try and see what it would be like to run an institution of one of these scope or size. So it was unknown to me that I would end up there, but it's been a pretty happy marriage for the past 18 months.
And so I assume you all inherited an artistic vision of the institution. And then there's a skeptical look, I like that. Did you then want to shape it differently, or did you sort of, was it a gradual process?
I was brought in with a mandate for change and brought a vision with me. And in fact, in the negotiations, the idea for a city like Kansas City, which is dead square in the middle of the country, a city of 2 million, we have everything that you have in a mid-sized American city. We have an opera and a ballet and a very great museum and the theater. And there was a desire to make the theater better and more relevant and reach a national audience in a way that it hadn't. And so that was really exciting to me because it had never been done. It wasn't something, I wasn't standing on the shoulders of giants as we were talking about earlier. I was coming in with a plan and an idea for a city that had never seen that kind of thing before. So that's why I went, really.
Yeah, for me it was, it's a great ballast, a great joy, and great support to stand on the shoulder of giants. Long Wharf was founded by John Jory in the middle 60s. John stayed for, I think, 18 months. Then Arvin Brown took it over and was artistic director, and in a way was the spiritual founder of that organization. Arvin was there for, a couple of 2.5 decades. And then Doug Hughes ran it for 4 or 5 years, and then I've taken over. So even though we're all 4 of us very different human beings, I think we all share very similar values. And it's not hard to find the North Star. It's not hard to find true North. Long Wharf, it's adapted to the times, I hope. Certainly I'm trying to. But the kind of work that Long Wharf has been committed to is really more or less the same over. There are some variations. I love American musicals, so we've been doing American musicals in my tenure, and there are certain kinds of new plays that I'm attracted to that Arvin or Doug might not have been attracted to. But more or less, if you look at the history of the theater, there is it's a very noble, very proud tradition, and something really very very similar about all of us. So that's a support system for me.
I'd read somewhere that a rule of thumb of regional theaters is that you can do the musicals or the crowd pleasers in order to give you the right to do the experimental shows. I also read somebody said that that's hogwash, but what?
It is hogwash. It is hogwash. I mean, I don't want to keep talking,
No.
but I find that to be hogwash. I mean, Long Wharf is really based. It's steeped in language-driven plays and actor-driven plays. The American musical theater tradition is one of our great contributions to world theater from the history of world theater. I joke sometimes, and I think it's true, that Shakespeare would have been very happy to have written the book To Guys and Dolls. There are some plays of Shakespeare's that aren't as good as the book To Guys and Dolls. And so I offer that stuff with great pride. They're expensive to do, very, and whilst they do sell a lot of tickets, they still don't make up for the amount of money that it costs to do them. We still need the support of individuals and foundations and the like. So it pleases some part of the audience, and actually there's some part of the audience that would much rather see Long Day's Journey into Night than Carousel. And a substantial part of my audience, that's the case for.
I feel the same. I feel like part of the goal is to keep the most diverse audience possible with the widest ranging taste. And in order to do that, you have to give them a really broad palette of different things. And that can be a huge musical, and that can be a simple play with a chair and an actor, speaking some great words. And unless you commit to the whole range of what theater can be, you haven't created an interesting theater.
Right. I mean, I think that is the trick, finding a diverse array of what you can offer them within a singular vision, so that people experiencing the first play will not think by the fourth play, why are these two things sitting within a season you've strayed in. But, and the more I think about it, the more, we continue producing in theater, I wonder, is there a unified audience who can all like all of that? And what are our reasonable expectations? Because people who come see Grey Gardens are just not going to like, the Edward Albee play we just did, At Home at the Zoo. I mean,
but that's not necessarily true. That's not necessarily true.
I mean, not always, but...
I find, I think our job, I don't know if we would all agree with this, that our job is the exercise of our taste. That is, we're hired by our Board of Trustees to, of course, to program sensibly with economic responsibility, but to you know, when I stray, when I make mistakes, it's when I produce something that I don't love. That I have to love everything that I produce, and if I love it, I can assume that others
Everyone
would.
will.
Not everyone will, but
We are the audience. We are that taste.
yeah, exactly. So
arbiter.
I would add into that to communicate effectively, to communicate the mission of the theater to your audience, to the press, to the artists, and to make sure the audience knows what they're going to come see. Because I do think
Absolutely.
that if an audience can love Beckett and can love Guys and Dolls, as
Right.
long as they know they're choosing to come see Beckett and they're not tricked into seeing it.
So there's transparency going in, that they know what they're. So an educated audience is a happy audience.
I think that's
But
right.
there's
like
also
to-
a question of goodness, you know, and event. I mean, we Marcel Proust said, you know, if you can say it well, you can say anything. And so far, in my experience in this big theater, in what's supposed to be a conservative town, the first play we did was a hip hop musical called Clay, which features a stepmother performing oral sex on a boy, which is represented by a microphone in a very explicit way, and murder and rap music. And we got letters from 70-year-olds saying it was the best thing they had ever seen, and then ended, and then we did, a very beautiful but kind of avant-garde production of the Glass Menagerie, directed by David Cromer, that should have been upsetting, but was so beautiful that the purists were excited about it and young audiences were excited about it. And it teaches me that the sense of innovation, at least in a place like Kansas City, because it's not a saturated market, that the delight can come from all sorts of different sources. And I think what's great about running a theater where we're not competing with 30 other theaters in the region is we can set the agenda of what I might think is delightful, but create a sense of event around the making of it, and then of course then puts a lot of pressure to say that I'm always going to be right, that the plays we do are always great, and that's obviously not going to always be true. But
yeah, I think that maybe what we all share is sort of a missionary zeal for the work we do. We love it, and I completely agree that our job is in part to communicate accurately with our audience what they're in for, as best as you can. But sometimes it's, at least for me, and I wonder if you guys agree, the joy is in taking a work that you love and that somebody might not at first love. A Beckett play is a perfect example. This is a play that artistic directors and dramaturgs love, and a writer that audiences sometimes have a hard time with. And to do it in such a way that maintains the integrity of Beckett's great work, and also really shows the audience, hey, Beckett ain't so bad. Beckett is wonderful, funny, humane, moving, and theatrical.
It's kind of the essence of an artistic director's role, it seems. I want to go back to something Eric said about competition. I mean, obviously in Kansas City, you said that you're pretty much, I mean, there's opera,
there are plenty of, and there are 10 producing theaters in the region.
But some of the rest of you operate theaters in cities that have touring companies, they have other regional, how does it work within your own community, your theatrical community in the cities and in competition? Do you try to parse something out?
Well, I sort of envy your position because I'm in Philadelphia, and fortunately there's a proliferation of theaters at all levels, although there is an absence, I think, of one major $10, $15 million a year budgeted plus thinking theater. There is not that Lord A theater in Philadelphia, but there's been a proliferation of medium-sized Lord D and C theaters. And that's sort of interesting. And then there's been a kind of like the young companies coming up that have found that we've all managed to find our niches, but occasionally we collide. And Philadelphia is still a fairly small population as urban cities go.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it feels like a fishbowl where the water is getting increasingly lower, and yet our ambitions are getting larger, and our need to grow. We just opened a new theater 2 years ago. So what do you do about that? So occasionally we come into conflict with our valued colleagues about a play or a musical. And, every other year it seems to happen. And so I wonder what it's like when you kind of can choose.
Do whatever
and
you
you're
want.
not near New York either. And so it's sort of virgin territory. You can really do what you want without threat by you're co-opting that market.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always, in any community that has a theater tradition, there's going to be a sense of collaboration and competition, there are some really wonderful theaters in Kansas City. People who are real pioneers who've been the producing artistic director of a theater called the Unicorn Theater, has been at it for 30 years, carving out an innovative space for alternative theater in a place like Kansas City. And then I come in as the new guy, we open this new theater, and suddenly we're doing work that the Unicorn feels is their territory, and we have to negotiate that, and that's it's complicated to figure out. We had a lot of practice at it in Chicago, being reared, spending 15 years there. This sense of how we could all fit together, how 250 theaters could operate in that mid-sized, big-ish small city, we got really practiced at working between how Steppenwolf might reach out to an About Face, and how About Face might reach out to a museum of contemporary art, and how the Goodman might get involved, and how another small theater might benefit.
Chicago seems idyllic to me. It's like you've all worked it out perfectly.
There are idyllic
true?
things about it, except for the thing we can't tell you with Chicago people is no one comes. You can do the best play in the world, and it's really hard to sell if you're not.
Is that because it's
subscribed.
saturated, or is it just that
There are more theaters than there are people in Chicago, actually. It's
That was the
true.
problem in Seattle. I ran a theater in Seattle for a number of years, and it was a joyful experience for me. But Seattle also there are more people subscribing to theaters than going to churches and synagogues. There were 3 major theaters in Seattle: Seattle Rep, Inman, and Act Theater, major, and plus a symphony hall, an opera hall, a dance company, a baseball team, a football team, a basketball team, and 3 jazz clubs. And it's a city of only 800,000.
Yeah.
And what about 3 million metropolitan?
Yeah, 2.5. So having so many great colleagues was fun. Having to compete with those colleagues for properties, I found less pleasant. And if there was ever any tension amongst the artistic directors in the town, who were all basically friends, it was over that, and some bruised feelings emerged. And that seemed unfortunate, and I didn't know how to solve it. We tried to solve that problem. In New Haven, where I run Long Wharf now, it's a different, I don't really compete for the rights. James Bundy, who runs Yale Rep, is a great buddy of mine, and we always talk privately. Before our own trustees know what we're thinking of, we call each other and say, well, I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking of that, because there's very little, occasionally there's overlap, but it's, there's New Haven's a city of 85,000, and Greater New Haven is 250,000, so it's really tough. And then there's Hartford Stage, 45 minutes to the north, and now Westport Playhouse is programming year-round, and it's 30 minutes to the south. Yale Rep, Goodspeed, and the Schubert Booking House. So there's a lot of competition for people's time. It's not so much the money, although we compete sometimes for donors, but it's really people's time.
San Diego's kind of a perfect setup right now. It's got about a population base of about 1 million, and a lot of theater energy in 2 major theaters. It's the Playhouse and the Old Globe. And they're right in the center of the main park in San Diego. Their taste is like, they really hold down the center of the taste spectrum in a great way, which frees us up to be counterculture, actually. And I love that tension.
That's great.
Like that there's sort of healthy competition, and someone else will always do the real center of it. So we get to sort of play.
It's a relief.
It's a relief to know that we get to play all the edges.
How far are you from San Diego?
15 miles.
Never been there. I gotta go see La Jolla at some point.
We have to invite you out.
It's beautiful.
One of the things that obviously is a thread through all of this conversation is your passion about new work. And again, read an interesting thing about whether regional theaters are incubators for new works on their own, and where they are incubators with their fellow regional theaters, and when they might be incubators for this town. So I wanted to sort of...
We've got all 3 this season.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yes to everything.
All of the above.
All the above.
So dive in.
And they were all connected. I mean, Gordon commissioned this play, Palomino, that David Cale starts previews tonight, that we're doing the premiere of, and we're co-developing a show that was commissioned by the Taper that is premiering in a co-production with us, then going to LA, and then we're doing a commercial project that was seeded by it came to us from commercial producers to do our first out-of-town tryout, which you guys do frequently I had to call Chris and get advice on what to do. So we're all kind of connected in that way, which is a really amazing thing about the field, that we do all sort of know each other and can get to each other and share, especially across the regions.
I think especially this economic environment has made theaters cooperate, collaborate, co-commission, co-produce more than ever.
Last season we premiered, we did the world premiere of a Terrence McNally play called Unusual Acts of Devotion. And then La Jolla Playhouse did it, how many months later? 9 months later?
Something like that.
Just good gestation period, and kind of overhauled it.
But using your set.
Using our
several
set.
members of your cast.
A member, one member. Was it?
Your
Was it
cast?
I think so. I think it was Richard Thomas. That was it.
Maybe it's only one, yeah.
Yeah, and then you cleaned house.
Reconceived.
Reconceived. No. The
Learned
changes
from
were
it.
so
Learned from
great.
the first step and made the second
The
step even
changes
richer.
they're all right-minded changes. Absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Changes that you wanted when it was done, or
I mean, it was kind of collaborated.
It was-
we
yeah,
actually
very-
talked about.
a lot.
I called Sarah up and said, "How'd it go? You know, does it need another step? You know,
Right.
if so, what are the issues?" And agreed about a lot of what she had to say. And Terrence McNally had a lot of rewrites he wanted to do. So I think it's the changes that are going to happen end up being a kind of collective
Yeah.
decision.
Part of the provenance of the play that just accumulates and is carried forward.
One of the things I love about trying to commit an audience to being interested in new work is trying to get them excited about success and failure and actually excited, adventurous enough
Yeah,
that they
right.
can come to the theater and say, wow, that didn't work, but it's so interesting.
Right.
It's what an ambitious failure, and those can be exciting for an audience too. Hopefully they're rarer than the triumphs, but that both are okay, and that it's a huge research job to do new work, and it's not always pre-approved, and sometimes you're going to go down the wrong road.
There was a great model that happened around Next to Normal that we all know about, where it was running at second stage one season, and then the producer sort of put it back in the shop, and it went down to Arena, and they did amazing new work, and then it was brought back to Broadway, where it sort of achieved its greatest success, and I think that happens more and more. We saw humor abuse at Manhattan Theater Club last season with Lorenzo Pizzoni, and we brought Lorenzo and Erica, his co-creator, down to Philadelphia, and they totally opened it up for a proscenium stage, and we're working with a commercial producer, not to be named at the moment, who I think might then sort of take it back and then take it to that more commercial future. Mm-hmm. So it was, that would be like 3 producers and 2 theaters giving it momentum. And I think you see any and all configurations these days.
But then that is really great for artists. I think that's, as we talk about the economics of why we do these things, the chance to get a production from a city to a city to a city to a city,
Right.
it takes 4 times. It just does, to know what the thing is that you're making. And we as producers have to be sensitive to where we are in the process.
Right, the development
Are you-
spectrum.
Yeah, and are you the
Right,
first
yeah.
step or are you the last step? And sometimes there's a lot of value in being the first step, and sometimes there's a lot of value in being the final moment when it finally achieves what it wants to. Right. How do we train our audiences to feel great about being the first people to see something that's going to get a lot better 4 productions from now? And conversely, how do we market? This is not the world premiere, the 4th production of.
The co-production. I mean, the dirty lie about co-production is it's great to have the world premiere, but the receiving theater gets the better show, right? Isn't that always the case?
I think audiences are really interested too in tracking the show after your theater.
I think they
to
are.
see how it changes
Anna
and where it
Yes.
goes.
Anna DeVere, we developed Anna DeVere Smith's "Let Me Down Easy," which just opened a few nights ago here in New York, and there's tremendous pride. I was at a preview last night at Wharf, and a number of subscribers came up to me, and one person last night said to me, "My friend invited me to go see Let Me Down Easy," and I told her, "I saw it already."
There's real pride
Now
there.
the show has
you know?
gotten better and
Exactly.
richer and deeper,
Right. Yeah.
but there is a tremendous sense of
Yeah.
pride,
Yeah.
and pride in all our parts, and Anna has been very, very generous about that too. So,
But as directors, all of you, do you find sometimes you can be conflicted about a project that comes to you that you'd like to direct that already has a director attached to it, therefore you have to be more of a producer, or do they seem to play out easily?
You know, I don't know how you got. I actually love other directors. I get sick of myself, and one of the reasons, you know, I always wanted to be an artistic director. Because first of all, freelancing was a debilitating and demoralizing experience. Always looking for work is really it's really not a happy experience.
Like
it
an
wasn't
actor.
For me. It's really I was like an actor. I wasn't made for it, and I found it really hard. And number two, I'm very interested. I was always very interested in other people's work, and it's sort of natural for me to sort of like to have other artists in my home. You know, it's more of a home thing for me. I like people coming over for dinner. Yeah. So I like other. So I'm thrilled, and I pursue other directors, and there are so many other directors whose work I love. And so that it's for me. I can't think of an instance in all my years of it ever being a sticky wicket.
I had my assistant made such fun of me last week. I was sitting in my office and I was on the phone with a producer for my show for Memphis, and telling the producer, I have to have this, whatever the thing was. I can't, the show's gonna be ruined unless I have it. I hung up, I picked up the phone and told the director, I don't care what you're not getting it. No way. It's too expensive, you can't have it. And like wearing those two hats of like the director who's always kind of trying to get more for their production, and the producer who's always trying to keep it as lean as possible can be hilarious.
Well, I don't direct for the stage anymore. I haven't done that in many years. So I'm a producer, and I'm the humble servant of any director that comes. So I have no ego about that, and we just want the most interesting director for the project. So that gives me kind of a different point of view than I had when I was an artistic director, where I had a vague sense of competition because I was young and dumb and I didn't know what I could learn. So it's a slightly different dynamic.
Well, it is. I mean, one of the greatest things about our jobs is that we get to sit in the rehearsal room and watch other directors direct, which when you're freelancing, you never do. We're like vampires. We don't, directors don't get together really very often to share work because it's threatening and strange and scheduling-wise impossible. But 7 or 8 times a year, we get to sit for long periods of time with a play that we are not directing and study it. You know, we're just about to close Moises Kaufman's Into the Woods, and we've gone through that journey with him. Right. I'm so glad I didn't direct it, and that I have to learn everything about that play as if I was taking a class on Sondheim.
It's like graduate school.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's the most joyful part of the job for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned, I mean, you know, not having gone to graduate school, I get to,
Right, me too.
my personal example of it.
Right.
Tina Landau came last year to direct Paula Vogel's Civil War Christmas, which is a gorgeous play. And Huntington's taking it up this year. Watching, I mean, I learned she's just so much not the kind of director I am, to her benefit. And I learned, she's done a couple of shows for us, and I adore her. And I learned so much from watching her work. I grew.
And that first question we were asking of what does an artistic director do, if part of it is taste and part of it is communication, I think part of it too is you build a group of artists who the audience starts to fall in love with.
Right.
And it's that continuity of the artist that actually defines the theater.
Absolutely right.
And maybe in addition that the artist falls in love with the audience too, that's really important. That when we go places and work regionally, sometimes you feel fed by the audience, and sometimes it's a real nightmare and it doesn't fit. And I think finding the collection of artists who are going to love being in your home city and love working there and love the conversations they get to have with the people that you've assembled, that's the perfect match. Because there is sometimes just a non-fit. You feel like the audience is hostile to you. You can have a really unpleasant experience, even if the reviews are good. And places where I've not wanted to go back have generally been because I didn't feel like I fit with the audience. And places where I've been dying to go back are places as a freelancer that I felt that those conversations were feeding me as an artist, listening to that audience listen every night. And that's really idiosyncratic in like dating. I mean, that's, who knows?
Do you find that part of your role is to reach out into the community that you're in beyond the theater and sort of help position you and the institution in the community? And if so, and how would you do that?
A big regional theater in a small community is a leading part of citizenship in the region, is absolutely key. And we can do good by doing well, and we can also do good by, we raise a lot of money for other causes. We go out, and the other night we did a free night of theater for civic employees and social service workers. Opened up the entire house. We get out and support other theater companies. We do a lot of parades. You know, there's, for me, that I learned this from being in Chicago, that you have to be in the fabric of the place where you are, and that political and social work explains the value of what you do, in addition to things we always jump to, like we do great education work, we change the cultural lives of the people that come. There's an opportunity in these bigger places to actually say, we're changing the city. We're making this a better place to live in meaningful and material ways. And that to me is really important.
And we built a new theater just to be on the most public kind of nexus where everything happens in Philadelphia, so we can really add to the conversation going on. And being a citizen, a good cultural citizen, is essential. Again, it's an everyday occupation that you exercise and make manifest through your education programs, even your interaction through businesses, with your audiences at all levels, with putting your productions out there in as many ways possible on and off-site with the community, so it takes a conversational life apart from the art on stage. And I think that's what we all do all the time, to make ourselves an essential part of the fabric of the community. For lots of reasons, for goodness reasons, because we know it's the right thing to do, and for survival reasons, because if you're not integrated into the fabric of the community, you can maybe not be there.
Yeah.
Why should you be there?
Have any of you done specific pieces that have direct references to what is going on, the issues that are specific to the community?
Yeah, we always search for that stuff. I actually have been in long conversations with a wonderful playwright, Che Yu, about writing, because New Haven is a city of great stratification, famously so. And many of the different elements of New Haven never meet unless somebody's cleaning somebody else's house. And many of the strata of New Haven have a lot of opinions about each other. And we've got this big university in the middle. And so it's a really complicated and very... Yeah, there is. University of New Haven. It's a great public college, yeah. And so New Haven is a very complicated place in a way that a lot of people don't talk about. And I'm in search of a play to really deal with that. And so far, I haven't been able to make that.
I used to do that, quite a lot of that work in Chicago at my old theater, About Face Theater, does a program with LGBT kids, where self-created performances that take on a very large regional life across the Midwest, kids doing performance work around LGBT safety issues, and then performed on site at our theater. And I'm trying to take those values and learn how to take the value of what we did at About Face and turn that into what a big regional theater can do. It will look really different. We're actually developing a piece with Michael Road from Sojourn Theater that's a 3-year investigation of race, geography, and class in Kansas City, which is we're across a state line, 2 rivers, and historical dividing lines that date back to the Civil War, that have really defined and shaped the history of the place that no one really understands, but affect everyone's life in a daily way. And bringing Michael in to work on how to even unpack what a large community performance would look like in the Cornerstone vein is at a big regional theater is a lot harder than at a small theater in Chicago where we could do whatever we wanted.
We do that a little bit with actually theater companies. Right before I got there, the Playhouse had done a huge expansion and shifted from just having 2 theaters to having 4. Wow. And we really can't fill them all the time. So every year we invite a small local theater company in to be in residence and do their work at the Playhouse. And they are almost always working on something that happened that day, that month, that year. It's very immediate work. Yeah. It's very quick time lag from idea to on stage, and it really helps us feel very connected to the community, young theater artists, and whatever's happening that month.
That's great. Do you also connect with other institutions in the area, non-performing institutions,
Absolutely.
non-theater institutions?
Absolutely, yeah. All kinds of institutions we have interface with, and we do all kinds of events with them. And the new Athol Fugard play, which we're going to rehearsals for in a couple of weeks, has Athol's first Jewish characters, and it's his first play set in America, and it's his first Jewish characters in nearly 50 years of writing plays, and we're doing all kinds of work with Federation and the local Jewish community, who are very proud to be in a National Fugard play. So, I mean, that kind of thing, and times 50.
How do you use the internet in your institutional roles? I mean, obviously, marketing is something that the internet has had a great influence on. But how creative have you guys been on the use of the internet?
Oh, you mean in marketing, or
well, just anyway?
I mean, we're just hooked on it. I'm on it 24/7, and the institution is. I mean, marketing. I mean, it's not just drifted. It's landed squarely in our chief sales. Social marketing, viral marketing is kind of where it's at, as we all know. I think jury's out in terms of how totally effective it is and who's being reached, but that's where we've all gone. So marketing-wise, that's where it is. Talking to each other, there's constant e-blasts going around to large swatches of communities, whether it's other artistic directors or through TCG or whatever. And then we're always on the internet with looking at the trades, looking at variety, looking at Broadway stars or whatever.
But
reading
also
about our work.
in a practical way, set designers send me early sketches.
Absolutely.
And
right.
I remember having dinner 15 years ago with a friend who was working for Esther Dyson, the internet guru, and she was telling me 15 years ago, it's going to change. Internet's going to change your life. You're going to be getting scripts through the internet.
Right.
Set
Scripts.
designers are going to be sending something. I said, no way. It's never going to happen. We're paper. We need to.
We are paper.
We have
wrong again.
Production meetings and creative meetings now on Skype. It's incredible that you can get people together in ways to have interaction with.
Absolutely.
Most of our designers come from elsewhere, and a lot of our artists come from elsewhere. So we can get conversations to happen instantly. I was in a meeting the other day, and we're like, "Oh gosh, this doesn't make any sense. Someone has to fly to New York," and I was like, "Or we can just, hey Walt, can you tell us what to do now? Look at this. Look at this picture. Tell us is that what it is? Okay, great." It's deepening the ability of, I think, theater's far flung to work with artists in a network connection very easily.
We did a musical where the lyrics and book and music was
did.
composed, long distance through the internet.
Yeah. You did a musical about the internet, didn't you?
Pardon?
Didn't you do a musical about the internet?
Oh, we did Nerds.
Yeah.
About Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, but that wasn't it. It was
about
Adrift in Macau with Chris Durang and Peter Melnick, composed and wrote the whole book and lyrics and music on the internet. Talking to each other.
But do you still send subscription brochures through the mails?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have to do both still.
Why do we do that?
We
But
just did a thing that was very fun. We were trying to broaden our email address list because there's still a lot of people who don't want you to have their email address. So we ran a contest saying, if you think your life would be a good play or musical, send us your story.
That was brilliant.
And you get your friends to vote for you, and the highest vote getter, Doug Wright, Pulitzer Prize winner, will write a 10-minute scene from your life.
Wow.
And it went
Isn't that
great.
great?
That's amazing.
Like tens
That's
of
really
thousands of entries,
What a
like huge
great
numbers of
idea.
votes, and the play was hilarious.
Well
It was
done.
really
Can it be
good.
expanded?
Yeah.
Can it be produced, you think?
I think this is actually a play, the little 10-minute play. Yeah, I think it could go around the country. It's a really, really good little play.
I want to talk about Broadway, because obviously when the regional theater movement started, it was separate from Broadway. They were all not-for-profits, and I don't think a commercial producer would have gone anywhere near a regional theater, nor would a regional theater have collaborated, I'm saying, with a commercial producer. But you've all had shows that as directors or as producers, producing artistic directors, have come to Broadway. What happens when a show comes to Broadway to you in your theater at home?
There's tremendous excitement. We're in the middle of it now. Memphis was at La Jolla Playhouse, and then at Fifth Avenue in Seattle and on Broadway. And the whole La Jolla, San Diego community is so tracking every minute of what's happening in New York on the show. What are the changes? And really excited.
Well, we produced and developed a master class, of course, in conjunction with Bob Whitehead, the legendary Bob Whitehead. And that, I wonder if we'll ever have anything bigger than that. I can't crawl out from under the shadow of masterclass. It was so huge for us, and it still continues to reverberate. It went from our theater, then I think, Mark Taper picked it up, and then it went to the Kennedy Center, and then Broadway, and then it won a Tony, several Tonys, and then it toured the world, and then it had this huge regional life. So we continue to benefit from that.
And it came to you because you had a relationship with Terrence McNally.
Terrence McNally. We had done a production of Lips Together, Teeth Apart, that Chris directed, that Terrence liked so much. He said that Philadelphia and our theater is a great place outside of New York to maybe develop something new. And based on the work you did for us, he came to us with this proposal to develop Masterclass. So thank you.
I think you should
Did I
get
ever
some.
thank you?
I think you should get some royalty for that.
I mean, really, I give you 3/4% of.
That would be a lot, Master. But
They're seductive, though. I mean, you have to keep reminding audiences that the goal isn't to get a show to Broadway. Like, you're really, if you
Right.
run a regional theater, you're trying to do theater there for that audience that's exciting there, and Broadway is the bonus, it's not the goal.
it's a double-edged sword. We all love it when our plays go to New York. But Long Wharf, which has had such a long history, I mean, I would love to see the compilation, but I don't know how many plays from Long Wharf have gone to New York, but the number is huge. And in large part because of its proximity, it's very easy for a producer to come up and see a work at Long Wharf and go home and be in his Upper West Side bedroom at 11 o'clock, 11:30 at night. But of course, but the pressure to have another one that's going to go to Broadway, and the expectation that can be created if you do something that is no chance it would go to New York, can create the wrong tone for what is really our mission, which is to produce the very best theater that we can for our community, and for the field. And if it has a commercial, we're non-profit theaters, and I think we need to remember that we have to take that very seriously. The reason we're tax exempt, and the reason we get foundation support, is because we are providing a public service, and much like the library. The library needs to have Dan Brown books in it, and books by Michael Connelly, but if they don't keep James Joyce in the library and Marcel Proust in the library, it's not longer a library. It's not worth. It doesn't deserve to exist, and that's fundamentally our job, is to be a keeper of great theater and to try to produce new theater and experiment and bring the form forward and to challenge ourselves and our audience. And look, we all know the reality of this business. It's fantastic for an institution when a show comes to New York and gets great reviews. It's revenue, Masterclass. Joe Papp, well, that was in New York already, but I mean, so many theaters have. We still get money out of I Love You, You're Perfect, Now Change. Long Wharf still gets money out of that.
From us.
Thank you.
From Rogers and
We'll talk
Hammerstein. Thank you very
afterwards.
much.
I was going to talk to you about other things, but in the end, we must. We have to come back to first principles. It's essential, or else we really lose our way.
And to keep ticket prices low, and that's another challenge as well. That's the other pact we make with the public and with the government.
Yeah.
I mean, to go back to the artistic question, that for me, the question of getting to New York, it's certainly desirable, and I don't have as much experience as my colleagues at the table. But the other question is, for our artists, how do we get their careers to have meaningful impact outside of our producing lives? And that to me is an obsession of why I spend a lot of my time on the internet and on the phone with people saying, you've got to come see this, you should do this. It's not necessarily about getting that show to New York, but getting that artist to have the chance to have his work or her work seen 4 or 5 times, to get the chance to make it what he or she wants it to be, is a real passion. And that is, I think, an emerging idea that we can build out of these co-productions and out of these partnerships, more meaningful lives for the artists that come to us and create what we do. And we all know that they have the hardest lives, creatively and financially, and we can and should support them on their paths towards commercial success in New York, or 14 regional productions of their play, or getting their name out, for getting young writers' name into the Rolodex of our colleagues. That's what we can. That's the advocacy role we play for artists.
That's right.
We can also, I think, provide artists with a much more supportive reception than you're going to get in New York.
Yeah.
I'm certainly La Jolla, the audiences are there to enjoy.
Yep.
You know, and they don't enjoy everything, but
Right.
it's not a hardened, jaded audience.
Yep.
It's an audience that's like
You're going
trying
to get a fair hearing of your
Yeah,
play.
absolutely.
Well, what about the critical community? She posits. Do they do what they need to do to fulfill that, you know, that tone of there to support artists and to, you know, encourage audiences to attend? Or are they part of the picture? Are they standing apart?
In La Jolla, the critical community is very smart, very active, very involved, but I feel like the audiences, unlike New York, use a lot more factors in deciding what to see than the reviews. Like the reviews don't determine success or failure in the same way that they do in New York.
It's the same in New Haven. I mean, we have a very sophisticated audience. I mean, our audience subscribes to the Roundabout and Manhattan Theater Club also, as well as coming to Long Wharf, a lot of them. So I would say in all candor that we don't have, there is a been there, done that quality to some of my audience. Some of my audience, and because they have been there and they have done that. It is the fourth production of The Price that they've seen. It is the fourth production of Long Day's Journey that they've seen, and the seventh production of Glass Menagerie they've seen. So, and sometimes that works in your favor, because I remember I did my first year at Long Wharf and my last year at ACT, I did Morning Becomes Electra. It's the same production, went from theater to theater. Now in Seattle, I had, for Jane Alexander was in it, brilliant performance, and Mireille Enos. And in Seattle, O'Neill has not produced a lot in Seattle. And neither is the Oresteia. So they really liked the play very much, but the context for that play was not, I mean, it wasn't lost on the entire audience, but I think in general, they took it on its own terms. The Long Wharf audience had seen a lot of O'Neill, because Long Wharf has had a long history with O'Neill. Many of them had seen the Oresteia or knew the Oresteia better. So it was a very different kind of response. On the one hand, more critical. You could call the word more sophisticated, you know, they both have their values. I'm not sure I like one better than the other, but they are different. I don't know. We don't have exactly the same experience. I don't know what it's like in Philadelphia, but Kansas City and La Jolla.
I
is more like the
love
Seattle
when an
experience.
audience though comes because a friend told them to.
Yeah.
I just think that's
Word of
so
mouth
healthy.
is it.
it.
Without it, you can't. A show
Yeah.
can't succeed,
Yeah.
no matter what the reviews are.
Yeah. Do reviews affect you, Sarah? Or how big are reviews in Philadelphia?
Well, I mean, the good thing is that there are more media outlets where you can, you know, search for those other opinions. There's blogs and internet things, and you can access them very, very easily. And I mean, you can get Talkin' Broadway or, you know, Theater Mania or Curtain Up and all of that, and that's a counterbalance to the Philadelphia Inquirer, which unfortunately is the only daily in our city. We are a one newspaper town, and it's currently.
You say that like that's a remarkable thing. but
Well, I mean, there's
almost every
usually
city
more
but
than
New
one.
York, not anymore.
Well, I mean, isn't it? Well, I mean, there's the Trib, for example,
Yeah.
in Chicago. There's the Tribune, and then
And the
there's
Sun-Times.
the Sun-Times.
Sun-Times.
Okay, we just have the Inquirer. Even in Washington, you have the Post and you have the Times.
Right.
In New Haven, people read the New York Times. And we get reviewed by the
Kansas City people read the New York Times.
Right. So, and the local press, I mean, there's some really smart people writing in the local press, and we can get, and it has some impact, but not an overall significant one, I don't think.
Do you find that your audiences, you think your audiences read the chat rooms? Because, I mean, I find that
Mine don't.
I don't.
Okay.
Just the hardcore theater mavens
That's
who.
yeah, and that's two handfuls.
Everybody who works on a show, the first preview in this town, bam, right on.
Right,
I can
right.
see what
I
everybody's
mean, that
saying.
is a different, that has really changed theater in New York, hasn't it?
But also the whole notion of who is a critic. I mean,
Right.
because once upon a time when there were a lot more than one newspaper per town, that's where they all were. And then is it television and not so much anymore, radio, you know. It's tricky.
The conversation has really changed since when I first got to New York 20 years ago. I feel like people were talking about how do we wean ourselves from dependence on newspapers? And now I feel like the conversation is, as newspaper business is kind of crumbling, what are we going
Right.
to do once newspapers are
Right,
gone?
right, exactly. What form will they take in the future?
You know, it's interesting. I think because we are artists, we take criticism very seriously and have been, you know, helped and hurt by the pen of various journalists. I don't think people in the regular world think about it in the same way. I think the best thing we can do is create media stunts. We had in Kansas City, unfortunately, our actors got the flu really badly right after Into the Woods opened, and we had to cancel the performance. And it made all 3 networks as a swine flu scare. And the next day we tripled our box office, which was the day before the review came out. It got so much exposure. These hilarious, like swine flu scare, at the theater, and then they'd show clips from the show, and people would, and it really launched that play in a very successful way. I don't think that we as theater producers are yet very smart about how to get the apparatus that people use, which is the television, to pay attention to what we do, and that's.
Well, that's the medium of our time that we've never been in sync with because we simply can't afford it. Yeah. I'm not sure there's another reason.
And we can't get the editorial coverage unless we have a swine flu outbreak.
They don't play with us. Yeah, exactly.
So, are there any instances of plays that you have wanted to do in your theaters but felt that your audiences would just be totally resistant to?
We did my first or second season. We did very early in Noah Heidel's career. We did a Noah Heidel play, and I love Noah Heidel's work. And we did a play called Rag and Bone of Noah's, early play of his, and I loved it. And Tina Landau came in and did a beautiful production. And it seemed to me the sweetest, tenderest play. I thought everyone would just love it. The audience, well, there was a percentage, particularly the younger audience, which really loved it. But the older audience, in general, with some exceptions, hated it. Terrible. Single tickets were terrible. And they still talk about it as one of the most horrible, worst things they'd ever seen. And it baffled me. I mean, I understand now in retrospect why everybody hated it so much, but it really took me by surprise.
I find audiences have problems when they tonally don't get what something is supposed to be, or it's non-linear. They don't have much patience. Right. If they can't figure out the form and the rules within like 10 or 15 minutes, you have lost them completely, and there's nothing but ire.
And if they don't, and I agree. And if they don't want to go there, I mean, I think Noah sets up the rules of his plays very clearly, but you just may not want to go to
there
that
anyway.
to that Noah Heidel land. And right. It's a very special place. I love being there.
We just added a program that I love, which it's called The Edge, and it's 4 plays that not everyone's going to love, and that are going to make some people really irate. And all those plays that are sort of too scary to do, just put them on the edge, and the audience is kind of self-selecting for wanting to have an edgy experience. Mm-hmm. And it kind of advertises itself as that's what it's going to be. And over time, that audience is starting to really find it.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's a good way to do it.
I assume you are all actually hired by the boards of directors of your institutions.
Correct.
Yes. Mm-hmm. What's the relationship between an artistic director and the board? I mean, I'm assuming that any opinion that an audience gives you, at least somebody on the board will voice her opinion one way or the other. But is it a collaborative experience? Is it a problematic experience with the board? Especially in these economic times, I think is part of it.
I've run two theaters and have a really charmed relationship with my board now, and a really wonderful relationship with the board at About Face. So I hear horror stories, and I try to imagine how it would come to the difficult moments that people get into. But so far, it's to me that if we take seriously the idea of community ownership and have our boards set up to tell us what the community, how successful we're being at engaging not just constituents who have money, but they have the people who are going to be involved in a civic board in a mid-sized regional theater are doing so out of some sense of civic engagement, wanting the city to be better, and can give me a lot of information about what plays and what doesn't, not just artistically, but what style-wise. I get a lot of coaching from the chairman of my board about who and how I should be presenting, and that's a really dynamic and very fruitful relationship. I'm also in the honeymoon stage, so it's right now it's a lot of love.
I'm in my honeymoon still too, but I feel like the board is the memory of the theater. Mm-hmm. They've been there, lots of them, for 25, 30 years. They remember all the phases of it, and they're as passionate as I am about that theater and what it can be and what it's for. So I feel like they're crucial.
Yeah, I have felt completely supported artistically, completely supported at Long Wharf and in Seattle before then. And if a show doesn't work, I kind of know it before they do, you know, and believe no recriminatory look that anybody could give me is any worse than how I feel when I look in the mirror in the morning. I feel, you know, like what you were just saying, Chris, in a way they're sort of, they're representative of they're the Greek chorus. You know, some of them are young, but they're the village elders, as it were. And they reflect parts of the community that that I'm not. I'm the artist in the community. They're bankers and lawyers and doctors and psychotherapists in the community, you know, and they hear and experience the community in a way that I don't. And I find that very, very useful. And new generations of artistic directors are a little bit more used to working with boards of trustees as a collaborator than perhaps other generations were.
Yeah, I think we understand the gig.
Yeah.
It's a more
Really clearly.
holistic view than maybe the artistic directors of the 70s, which was about just the work, it seems, and it being in the room. And I think now we are all holistic leaders of our institutions. We care passionately about the education programs and our place in the community and other holistic preoccupations that maybe was not true about artistic directors 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that is a perfect moment for us to conclude this conversation. I'm very happy that we've done this. I think that the regional theater movement is in very fine hands, at least 4 sets of extremely fine hands, and I thank you all for being here today and having this conversation. Thanks for joining us. These programs are brought to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York in partnership with our friends at CUNY TV. On behalf of the American Theater Wing, I'm Ted Chapin, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Working in the Theater. I'm Ted Chapin, chairman of the American Theater Wing. The Wing has played a vital role in New York's theatrical life for more than 60 years. Best known for creating the Tony Awards, we stand for excellence, but we also support education in the theater, and our work reaches beyond Broadway in New York. The Working in the Theater television programs, which are supported by the Annenberg Foundation and the Dorothy Straussen Foundation, are unequaled forums for discussions with today's most creative artists. Downstage Center's in-depth radio interviews were created in conjunction with XM Satellite Radio and can be heard on our website. Our annual theater company grants support New York not-for-profits, and since they began, have distributed nearly $3 million. We are also pleased to be the home of the Jonathan Larson Grants, which support emerging composers and lyricists. For people who are starting their careers, we have a 2-week boot camp for aspiring actors from colleges across the country called Springboard NYC. And our theater intern group provides a forum for young people who are starting their careers to build a professional network. All of the American Theater Wing's educational and media programs are available for free on demand from our website, americantheaterwing.org. Thanks for your interest in the Wing, and thanks for watching.